Yeah, episode 5 was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought they were going to continue this trend of, like, talking about like, each era of wrestling. So I thought this is going to get into, like, the Ruthless Aggression era, what happened with Chris Benoit. I assumed that was going to be the case going into episode 5. It touched on the Ruthless Aggression era a little bit, but not really. And it didn't talk about the Chris Benoit tragedy and how it transitioned to PG. I don't know how it's going to be for the final episode because they tease that they're... I've heard rumblings about what episode 6 was, like kind of like, you know, kind of like a post-show thing talking. I don't know. I'm not going to make an assumption anymore what episode 6 is. Although it teases that they're going to... That's something with the current allegations that happened after these interviews took place in 2021. So we'll see what happens with episode 6. But that's the future. Let's talk about episode 5, which was called Family Business. So this was a long episode. This was like a little bit over an hour. And, well, they mostly focused on the upbringing of the entire McMahons. They mentioned like what their roles were basically, and you know what Vince saw with them. We also talked about how Vince himself was going like above and beyond, like still kind of in like the Attitude Era for most of it. Talking about how Vince was willing to do anything himself on screen to draw in the viewers. And then there was also this very random little spot, like because it was like all family business for like the first 80% of this episode. Then there was briefly like a couple little like side notes that happened in there. And then they went back to the family side talking about the departure of Shane and how he was disappointed because he thought he was going to be the one to be the successor of his father. Paul Heyman tells a very scary type story involving a fallout, an argument that Shane and Vince had shortly before Shane left, and I think it was late 2009, I believe it was Shane left, before he came back in 2016. So we're going to get into all that. I guess first I'll talk about just a couple little things that was kind of like in between that was off topic of the whole family business stuff. So they addressed, of course, when they bought out WCW, whenever Ted Turner was selling. And of course, they would buy it out, and eventually WCW would kind of like, you know, fade off and whatnot, and it was all the WWF. Well, WWE, which is what they also briefly addressed as well. When in 2002, I believe it was, when, well, also, I think it was after, because they mentioned it, I think it was in 2000, the WWF went public, and it was shortly after this, the World Wildlife Fund, whatever it's called, they sued the WWF for their initials. They're saying now that they can't be the WWF. And remember, at one point, whenever Vince McMahon Sr. was in charge, it was the WWF. But of course, when Vince Jr. took over, it was the WWF. And then after they got sued, they dropped the F, and that's when they became WWE, because Vince saying it's entertainment. So they touched on that. They did touch on the Ruthless Aggression era, mentioning how The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin were both gone by 2004. The Rock went off to Hollywood. Stone Cold Steve Austin was not happy with the creative at the time, and he was all banged up, so he called it a day after 2004. His last match before he wrestled Kevin Owens at WrestleMania 38 was at WrestleMania 19 with him and The Rock in the rubber match of their trilogy. They also briefly did talk about bringing back Hulk Hogan, trying to create something big, icon versus icon. They talk about the match with Rock and Hogan from WrestleMania 18. How it's definitely one of the best matches ever. The crowd was all behind Hogan, and despite the fact that Hogan was supposed to be the heel going into the match, or was it face-off, I can't remember, The Rock settled into the role, and he played the heel, calling an audible during their match because The Rock was getting booed, Hogan was getting cheered. So there was all that going on there. Again, they did talk about the Ruthless Aggression era with some of the stars, like they mentioned a few names, Kurt Angle, Batista, John Cena, of course, they mentioned how Kurt Angle needed an opponent one night. They picked John Cena, and that's the famous, promo. And of course, Vince said he was waiting for like ruthless aggression or whatnot, this and that. So they touched on that a little bit as they did get into the ruthless aggression era and how the news started to build, but they didn't really talk like too much deeply into it. They of course also talked about, because we all know in like the late 90s, early 2000s, Vince was trying to make like more of like a variety show. Like, remember in like the late 80s, he tried the World Bodybuilding Federation and that didn't work. Well, of course, people claim that it didn't work because of the steroid trial, but in reality, it just wasn't going to work. Vince obviously just was not, fit to do anything other than the wrestling business. Anything else, whether it was the Brawl for All or the XFL, oh gosh, the XFL was horrible. All those other like extra things, trying to make it like a variety show, just did not work. Again, Vince back in the 80s was trying to mix wrestling with cable television, and there was only so far he could have gone with that, outside of the whole wrestling term, with it being entertainment and whatnot. I think that's all like the little like odds and ends in between. They did also address, well, okay, I'll save that part for the family business side. About he admitting in a Playboy interview that he did have an affair and cheated on Linda McMahon. Which, obviously, I feel like that isn't, that wasn't for a one-time thing, even though I don't know, are Vince and Linda still together? I really feel like, I really feel like that they shouldn't be, but they probably are. I'm not 100% sure, but, we'll see. I'll have to look into it later on and see if they, in fact, are still together. I'm pretty sure if they were in 2021... Linda wouldn't have been in these interviews. But the bulk of the story. So, Paul Heyman kind of prefaced this episode by saying that they re-talked about how Vince had a very traumatic childhood. He was physically beaten by his father, and he was also abused in certain ways, apparently by his mother, for the first 12 years of his life. And as he mentioned, basically getting beat up but still breathing, he thought was a win, and he was capable to do anything. So instead of just, claiming that he took that abuse and letting it impact who he is, he took that abuse as fuel to make him believe he was untouchable and could do anything. Of course, we know that did kind of go to his head, as he would eventually get a swelled head and a big ego. And of course, when he was senile, refused to give up the business. Which we'll get into that when we talk about the fallout with him and Shane in 2009. But, so Vince eventually would bring in his family, like his kids and his wife, to be part of storylines, especially around like 2000, 2001. At the time, Linda McMahon was actually like the head honcho, but she was head honcho on the business side. Vince was all part of the creative side and whatnot, it seemed like. But they still had them on television. And Linda even admitted she did not like being on television. She was not the best actor. But of course, Vince made her be on television. Stephanie was first asked to be on, and it was very established that Vince obviously favors Stephanie a lot more than Shane. It's been very known like what roles Stephanie plays on TV and behind the scenes. Shane has been very unknown. It's never been known completely what Shane has done backstage. And for the longest time, I think Shane even admitted, and of course he even did it in a storyline, Shane thought that he was going to be the one to take over the company someday. Of course, we all know that would not happen. But Vince started using Stephanie in some storylines. I think one of the earliest ones they mentioned was that they had her get married to Test. And I guess Triple H pitched the idea of getting her drugged and him basically her cheating on Test and him exposing Stephanie, that got the crowd to chant some nasty names towards Stephanie, which they went with it and turned Stephanie heel. And that started the whole McMahon Helmsley era, which was what also really helped Triple H. Of course, that's when Triple H's career, I think, really took off whenever he joined the corporation. I think it was at WrestleMania 14 or 15, I think it was when that happened. I can't remember which one it was. Probably 15, I think is when that happened. They also talk about how him and Stephanie working together a lot did lead to them falling in love and getting married. Now, Stephanie admitted that Vince had told her that she couldn't date a wrestler. But he had a good bond with Triple H. So he thought that, well, he trusted Triple H. And he, could see Stephanie marrying him. Of course, they eventually would. Vince also, which this isn't the craziest idea, of course. Vince also wanted their actual wedding to be on pay-per-view. Yes, Vince wanted their actual wedding to be part of a storyline. To which they said no. And I don't know if this is the reason why this happened, but I think it was 6 days before their actual wedding was when they had that match at that one pay-per-view, I think it was, where it was Vince versus Stephanie in that street fight. And I remember I watched it one time. I actually have watched this match before, a long time ago when I first got the WWE Network, like 10 years ago. I watched this match. I can't remember how I came across it, but I came across it and I watched it. And I'm just like, holy smokes, this is tough to watch. Especially with how he choked out Stephanie with that lead pipe. And Linda threw in the towel. Because at this time, this is where Vince was booking himself to have a mistress, which we'll get into that in a second. There's some idea that match was punishment for Stephanie for her not agreeing to do the wedding on pay-per-view, or it could have been just a plan from the start. But of course, again, Vince at this time was just going crazy, putting himself on TV and doing whatever he felt he can do to draw in viewers. Of course, I still question it, especially when they basically always had him having another mistress. It's like he had and of course, when he's being interviewed, how many times he would say something like, Vince McMahon, the character, which I'm like, you can't tell me that Vince wasn't just taking one for the team. You can't tell me that Vince, had some real desires for some of these women, in my opinion. But again, can't be proven. But they talk about, of course, how Trish Stratus got started, and how she was his first mistress. How there was the segment where, of course, Trish gets asked about it every time she gets interviewed, about the whole get on your knees and bark like a dog. He wanted her to strip live on TV. Because, again, at the time, all women were out there for was the sex appeal. Which, again, it's okay to have characters that have sex appeal. But, again, it's a wrestling product. They're not there just to show off their bodies. Yes, at the time, was women's actually wrestling really a draw? No. But, especially when you say this is a family-friendly show that Vince said back in episode 4, which was absolutely ridiculous. A kid should not be watching that. And then, of course, eventually, because they also had a storyline where they drugged Linda McMahon, and then she finally would get her comeuppance on Vince at WrestleMania 17. Trish had enough, of course, of Vince's abuse, so she turned on Vince at WrestleMania 17, which then led to Vince getting a new mistress after WrestleMania 17 in Sable, who we all know is married to Brock Lesnar. Now, here's something I didn't know, though. Other than the fact that I knew that Sable was super popular, I'm just saying, probably out of all the females, she was probably number one at the time. Was she the best wrestler in the world? No, but she knew why she was out there. But And this is where I kind of soured on Sable a little bit. Originally, she sued the WWE for Vince making her do things she didn't want to do. And she even accused him of things as well. But then, the moment she needed money, she dropped the lawsuit, came back to WWE, and was Vince's mistress. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. That just kind of makes you look bad, in my opinion. When I heard that, I wasn't a fan of it. And apparently, that's the reason why, apparently, so there's two people that apparently Stephanie McMahon had a lot of beef with. One, of course, is Chyna and her relationship with Triple H. And then there was Sable as well. Though apparently those are the two people that Stephanie McMahon despised the most. So that might be reasons why Sable is not yet in the Hall of Fame. If it wasn't for that, if she didn't try to sue the company, but then come back when she needed money, I'm pretty sure she would have been in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, I heard that. I'm kind of like, ugh. Yeah, that makes you look like that you're just trying to just get the money. And, you were just being selfish. I don't know. I wasn't a fan. I kind of, like I said, that was kind of like, ugh, whenever they said that. They also mentioned, because they asked Stephanie, did any of this ever, Vince first off claimed that Linda was okay with what Vince was doing on TV. People were even asking, did you find it weird they're doing this? And they said, yeah, it was a little weird, but it's show business. But like I said, why is the boss writing himself in several storylines where he has a mistress? I just still find that a little fishy, if I'm being real. Again, they did talk about his Playboy interview with him admitting he had an affair with Linda. Oh yeah, also, I forgot when it was, but there was somewhere in there where they mentioned something about Sable to Vince, and he claims he didn't remember it. Which I kind of had a hard time believing there as well, too. That he didn't remember certain things with Sable. Because, like I said, the two he definitely spent the most time with on TV, locking lips with, was Trish and Sable. I'm sure there are others, but I can't think of who they are off the top of my head right now. But I'm sure I've seen segments before. But also, too, I forgot to mention this, too. Trish believes the reason why she dropped the title to Mickie James at WrestleMania 21, I think it was, is because she refused to do I think Vince wanted her to make out with a woman. I think it was. And Trish didn't want to do that. I think it was something along the lines. And I think Trish thinks she got punished for it, which is why she dropped the title to Mickie James. Even though at the time, Mickie James, with her, Psycho Mickey character, was definitely one of the best things. So that may have been, just just more of business, but it also may have been her getting punished. Who knows? But there was that in there. Again, he talked about the affair with Linda. Oh yeah, when they did ask again of Stephanie, was there anything weird? Stephanie said, I really don't want to talk about it. Then they interviewed Vince, who was kind of cracking up about it. And he shared the story about how when Stephanie McMahon was pregnant, Vince wanted to do a storyline involving her being pregnant and say that he was the father of Stephanie's child. And when they didn't mention this, but when Stephanie said no, Vince said, well, what about Shane? Can Shane be the father? It's like, why are you obsessed with doing an incest story for your own, to embarrass your own daughter on live television? You see why that I just find it weird that he writes himself to having these mistresses and him, basically look like he's hanging out with all, the hot women and whatnot. And he goes off and tries to pitch an idea of a storyline with that, with his own grandchild. He wants to claim he's fathering it. Again, there's a difference with, going outside the box and going a little bit insane. Like I said, during this time, Vince McMahon was doing anything he could to draw views. desperately trying to get heat on himself and like I said, I just think some things he took it too far. They did, of course, talk about Shane, which we'll end with Shane. Shane, of course, did not approve of Triple H marrying Stephanie. And to this day, I don't think he still likes Triple H. Like, even like in these interviews, you got the vibe, even in 2021, he still was not a fan of Triple H marrying his sister. Everybody still remembers when he was interviewed with Mick Foley in 2016, and Mick asked him about Triple H. Shane goes, well, he makes my sister happy. We all know there's still tension there. Especially now that Triple H got the keys to the castle and he didn't. Which leads to what they talked about towards the end. There was a storyline on TV where, you know, Shane was cutting promos where he just wanted his dad to be proud of him and whatnot. Of course, when I heard this, I thought, well, this makes me think of years later when he turned heel on The Miz while Miz was trying to make his own father proud of him and whatnot. But, I guess, you know, towards the end of 2000s, was when Shane found out that Vince had no intention of selling him the company or is handing it over to him. He basically said, you know, you're either going to have to kill me or you're going to have to buy me out like I bought out my father. Some people say that the reason why Vince and Shane had an odd relationship was because Vince treated Shane the way his own father did, like, you know, showed him a lot of tough love. Paul Heyman told the story about how towards the end of Shane's first run, they had the falling out. And I guess they got into a very heated argument. And I guess Vince handed Shane a knife and pulled open his jacket and exposed like his like shoulder or whatnot, or his like, you know, chest right here, and goes, go ahead. If you want it that bad, kill me for it or buy me out. Basically what it was. Which, that's insane, of course, to hear. But that's why, again, Shane has said in other interviews that he left the company because he felt that business was getting in the way with the relationship with his family. So that's why he left to do other things. He even suggested, because it was during this time also where I guess they were selling the UFC before Dana White bought it. And I guess he pitched that idea to his dad and he goes, nope, we're not doing that. And Shane buying out being in charge of UFC could have been interesting. Because, no offense to Shane, he's not the best in-ring performer. But you could tell he's like a fan of like mixed martial arts and whatnot. Him being in charge of that could have been very interesting. But Vince didn't want to do it. So, like I said, Shane went off to do his own thing. And then, of course, he would come back. They didn't talk about that part, of course, how Shane did come back. Still don't know what his real role is behind the scenes. Only I know for sure he did was he wrote the men's 2022 Royal Rumble, and it didn't come out well. And apparently he was fired briefly for it. And they came back at WrestleMania 39. And they tore his quad during his impromptu match with The Miz. And we haven't seen him on WWE TV since. And we've seen plenty of teases with him going to AEW. With him having a private meeting with Tony Khan, him having a picture with the Young Bucks. Again, if you're going to tease the heck out of it, just debut him already. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, I think that's all that they talked about. Again, it mostly stuck with the family side of everything with Vince. The upbringing of Stephanie, which again, he definitely gave Stephanie a lot in the company, and now Stephanie wants absolutely nothing to do with her own father because of, you know, what he's been accused of and whatnot. And then again, how that, you know, he didn't hand the company over to Shane as Shane thought would happen. So obviously, again, that kind of caused a rift. So yeah, like I said, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Like I said, they did briefly touch on a couple other little small things here and there, like in between, and then closing with Shane leaving. But yeah, that's all for episode 5. Again, episode 6 is the final episode of the docuseries. I'm not going to jump and assume what we're going to see next, because I thought we were going to get more of, like, why they went back to being PG in this episode. It didn't happen, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, guys, what are your guys' thoughts on episode 5 of this Vince McMahon docuseries and everything else that we had talked about? Leave your guys' thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure also, as always, to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at the Club of the Man 93. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the Club of the Man 1993. And until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you guys later. I'll see you all in episode 6 and the finale of this Vince McMahon docuseries. Have a great rest of your night. I'll catch you all later. And do not forget, in order to be superior to the man, you've got to be the man. And for I am the man himself. And that is not just an opinion, my friends. That is a fact of life. Yeah!